Ever feel like you've already cherry-picked the entire 1950s? Not even close. I just spliced undisputed masterpieces into our reel of under-the-radar wonders, trading out a few titles that even die-hard cine-nerds admitted they'd never heard of. What you're about to watch is a turbocharged cut of 15 movies that prove the decade could swing from razor-edged noir to rain-slicked musicals to meditative Japanese poetry without missing a beat. Stay to the final frame, and your watch list will erupt like a flashbulb. Rear Window, 1954. Alfred Hitchcock's claustrophobic masterpiece unfolded on a single, purpose-built soundstage, the largest indoor set Paramount had ever attempted. Occupying almost half a city block, the courtyard stretched 4 stories high, complete with working drainage and lighting grids so Hitchcock could simulate dawn, dusk, and midnight thunderstorms at the flick of a switch. Operating almost entirely from inside James Stewart's cramped Greenwich Village apartment, the director used every dolly, zoom, and binocular point of view to lock the audience into the hero's voyeuristic gaze. Budgeted at roughly $1 million, the film ultimately sold an estimated 50 million domestic tickets and returned more than 37 million worldwide, a haul that translates to blockbuster status today. Beyond the suspense, Rear Window is an enduring lesson in subjective geometry. University film programs still pause the shot, where Stewart spies Grace Kelly's high-fashion entrance, then chart how Hitchcock choreographs our own desire to look. Costume designer Edith Head dressed Kelly in gowns whose price tags deliberately eclipse Stewart's freelance photographer income. Visual shorthand for the romantic gulf driving their subplot. Even its reissue story is legend. Because Hitchcock personally owned the negative, he withdrew the picture from circulation in 1968. When Universal re-released it 15 years later, the New York opening smashed house records at the Ziegfeld Theater. Today it anchors shelves of scholarly monographs, cognitive psychology papers on inattentional blindness, and ethics discussions about the thin line between watching and intruding. From Brian De Palma's Body Double to the quarantine-era thriller The Woman in the Window, filmmakers still riff on Hitchcock's blueprint, proving that a single apartment block, shot from one room, can feel like the most expansive thriller universe ever built. Ace in the Hole, 1951. After skewering Hollywood with Sunset Boulevard, Billy Wilder ventured into the New Mexico desert to autopsy American ambition. He spent nearly $2 million building a mock carnival around a gypsum cave, Ferris wheel, hot dog stands, and snake oil barkers included, so his story of a trapped miner could unfold beneath a media circus in real time. Kirk Douglas plays reporter Chuck Tatum, a man whose moral gyroscope spins faster than the cash registers he orchestrates. Production dragged through blistering summer heat. Wilder repeatedly screened footage of the 1925 Floyd Collins disaster for his crew, demanding they capture the same frenzy. To emphasize sensory overload, he staged scenes where real flashbulbs exploded in Douglas's face, forcing the actor to squint through literal white spots. Paramount grew queasy, retitled the film The Big Carnival at the last minute, and watched it stumble at the box office, only to discover, decades later, that Wilder's flop had aged into prophecy. Journalism schools now pair the film with Janet Malcolm's The Journalist and the Murderer as a cautionary tale about feeding the beast. Disaster management seminars use it to illustrate how crowds and commerce metastasize at crisis sites. When the Library of Congress selected Ace in the Hole for preservation, it cited the film's chillingly permanent relevance to 24-hour news culture. Blu-ray commentators trace how Douglas's rapid-fire patter anticipates modern cable punditry, while crisis communications experts dissect Wilder's fictitious 50-state radio hookup as a crystal ball glimpse of satellite news. What began as a bruising financial misstep now circulates as a field manual on media ethics, still unnervingly current in an age where tragedy and ratings form the most unholy of alliances. The Big Heat, 1953. Columbia Pictures allotted Fritz Lang barely $400,000 for this police noir, trusting the German émigré's reputation for speed. Lang responded by shooting most scenes in a single take, banking the savings for shock effects rare in Eisenhower-era crime dramas. The most infamous, a scalding pot of coffee hurled into Gloria Graham's face, a burst of domestic brutality that still makes audiences flinch. Adapted from William P. McGivern's serialized novel, Sidney Boehm's screenplay strips away subplots to focus on Detective Dave Banyan, whose crusade against a crime syndicate wrecks every life it touches: wife, informants, and ultimately Banyan himself. Lang's lighting scheme alternates gunmetal blacks with blinding practicals, a look restored by the Academy Film Archive after nitrate decomposition threatened the negative in the 1990s. Upon release, American censors winced but relented. The British Board of Film Classification trimmed 2 shots before approving UK exhibition. Commercially, the film did modest business, yet its cultural aftershocks reverberate loudly. William Friedkin borrowed Banyan's discovery of his murdered wife for To Live and Die in L.A. Brian De Palma echoed the coffee attack in Scarface. Heath Ledger's Joker carries shades of Lee Marvin's scarred thug. Critics now hail The Big Heat as an ethical Rorschach. The hero's righteous anger becomes indistinguishable from the mob's savagery. Roger Ebert inducted it into his Great Movies series for demonstrating how violence, framed with moral consequence, can jar a complacent audience into self-examination. 70 years on, Lang's lean thriller still feels like a live wire, proof that a small budget, a fearless script, and one boiling pot can burn a permanent scar into film history. The Night of the Hunter, 1955. Charles Laughton's first and only film as director cost barely more than $500,000, yet plays like a cathedral of nightmares. Working with cinematographer Stanley Cortez, Laughton lit his black and white sets to mimic German expressionist landmarks he revered: ragged silhouettes, skewed staircases, and skies carved from pitch-black cloth. He called the result a nightmarish Mother Goose, where children float downriver past barnyard gravestones and sheet-draped corpses. Robert Mitchum's preacher, Harry Powell, became an instant archetype, cadences lifted from revival tents, knuckles tattooed with love and hate, a tenor that slides from lullaby to threat in a breath. United Artists gambled on a grassroots rollout, premiering in Des Moines to court Midwestern churchgoers. They fled. Critics recoiled, box office returns flatlined, and Laughton never directed again. Yet the movie's afterlife is incandescent. French critics enshrined it among the greatest films ever made. The Library of Congress preserved it in 1992. Film schools worldwide dissect its riverside tableau, where children glide past barn animals frozen in silhouette. Spike Lee repurposed Powell's fist sermon in Do the Right Thing. Martin Scorsese screens the river escape for New Columbia grad students, calling it myth-crafted in moving pictures. Scholars debate the dual authorship of James Agee's colossal early draft versus Laughton's lyrical revisions, while theologians parse the film's subversion of pastoral iconography. From Cape Fear to A Nightmare on Elm Street, directors lift its chiaroscuro dread. What once played to half-empty houses now crowns world cinema polls, proof that fairy tales, when twisted just right, outlive the box office burials of their birth. A Face in the Crowd, 1957. Elia Kazan's media fable opens with a whoop and a slide guitar riff. Drifter Larry Lonesome Rhodes erupts from an Arkansas drunk tank to conquer American airwaves. Kazan gambled on unknown stand-up comic Andy Griffith for the role, armed with Bud Schulberg's screenplay and a budget north of $1.5 million. The production built a functioning television studio on Stage 7, piping Griffith's improvisations onto live monitors so he could riff with real-time audience feedback, a technical first for feature films. National sponsors loaned genuine product placements, vitamin pills, mattresses, freeze-dried dinners, all skewered on camera as Rhodes voraciously sells America back to itself. Contemporary critics found the story paranoid, and the film limped through its theatrical run, earning back only a fraction of its cost. Yet its predictive power is jaw-dropping. Communication scholars dissect the hot mic meltdown, where Rhodes mocks his viewers, a template for countless real-world broadcast implosions. Political scientists trace a direct line from Rhodes to entertainer politicians who blurred celebrity and governance decades later. A 4K restoration unveiled previously cut scenes showing Rhodes hawking a proto-energy drink, footage whose satire feels aimed squarely at today's influencer economy. Sound mixers note how technicians fed rising applause into Griffith's earpiece, an early experiment in psychological priming now standard in live studio broadcasts. Where studios once saw red ink, modern commentators see a crystal ball, power fused to personality, mass media amplifying authenticity until it curdles into demagoguery. A face in the crowd may have opened to half-empty theaters, but it now screens in journalism schools, advertising seminars, and campaign strategy war rooms. Its warnings only louder in the algorithm age. Sweet Smell of Success, 1957. The shot opens on Broadway at 2 in the morning, neon steam, traffic horns, and a sax riff from Chico Hamilton's on-screen quintet. Director Alexander McKendrick and cinematographer James Wong Howe spent 7 savage weeks prowling Times Square after midnight, wiring car batteries to portable lamps so Howe's cameras could drink in real city glare instead of backlot paint. Screenwriters Clifford Odets and Ernest Lehman stripped Lehman's earlier novel to bare nerves, replacing its sentimental core with Odets's verbal switchblades, son of a branded goat, diatribes fired by Burt Lancaster's column king J.J. Hunsaker. Lancaster camped at the famed 21 Club to study gossip brokers. Tony Curtis shadowed publicists at the Stork Club to hone his hustler's grin. Producer Harold Heck bankrolled the film at just under $2 million, but preview cards read vicious and too dirty. When it opened, the picture grossed barely a tenth of its cost. Yet, critics eventually circled back. The British Film Institute now ranks it among the 10 greatest American films. Scorsese lifts its God's eye angle of neon marquees in Taxi Driver, and Howe's high-contrast night photography became the Bible for every cinematographer who ever tried to trap nicotine smoke in a shaft of light. First, it remains the definitive lesson on media power and moral compromise in an age of viral outrage. Second, Lancaster and Curtis trade insults with a velocity modern scripts rarely match. Dialogue as lethal jazz. Singin' in the Rain, 1952. MGM handed producer Arthur Freed $2.5 million and free rein to cannibalize his own song catalog. Co-directors Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen answered with the most athletic musical Hollywood ever fielded. Kelly rehearsed the Good Mornin' trio, so hard Debbie Reynolds' feet bled, then shot the 6-minute take without a single cut. The headline title number was filmed last. Kelly had a 102-degree fever, insisted on dubbing the water pipe pressure himself, and pierced each umbrella with tiny holes so rain would sheet evenly. Donald O'Connor's Make 'em Laugh backflips required 2 days, multiple bruised ribs, and a hospital visit laced with adrenaline shots. Although it earned a respectable $7 million gross, it lost the Best Picture Oscar to The Greatest Show on Earth, a decision Oscar historians still cite as the Academy's most notorious miss. The American Film Institute now crowns it the highest-ranked musical. Neuroscientists studying dopamine spikes use the title sequence to measure joy responses in MRI scanners. It is still the quickest cinematic cure for a bad mood, and its behind-the-scenes satire of Hollywood's tech upheaval mirrors our own streaming platform chaos. The Killing, 1956. At 27, Stanley Kubrick conned United Artists into bankrolling a racetrack heist thriller for just over $500,000, promising he could shoot it in 24 days. He made it in 17. Adapted from Lionel White's pulp novel Clean Break, Kubrick re-engineered the plot into a Mobius strip of overlapping timelines, tracking shots that revisit the same corridor from 4 perspectives, each pass revealing a new betrayal. To stretch dimes, he borrowed television news floodlights for his set pieces, letting harsh fall-off mimic noir shadows. Sterling Hayden stalks through as Johnny Clay, but the director's true coup was landing Jim Thompson, king of dime store nihilism, for dialogue. Studio memos show Kubrick fighting to keep Thompson's lines like, "Fate has a rotten sense of humor." Test audiences were bewildered, box office receipts modest. Yet, French critics hailed the time fracture as revolutionary. Quentin Tarantino later called it the template for everything I do, and Christopher Nolan screened the film for cast and crew before shooting Dunkirk to demonstrate non-linear tension. It detonates genre expectations in a sleek 84 minutes, and its puzzle box structure feels tailor-made for the binge rewatch culture of modern streaming. Pick Up on South Street, 1953. Samuel Fuller's camera opens in a rush-hour subway car as Richard Widmark's pickpocket lifts a stranger's wallet in 3 silent cuts, the purest piece of visual larceny on celluloid. The microfilm inside marks him for the FBI and communist couriers, but Fuller cares less for politics than street pulse. Shot largely on New York's real docks, the film cost $800,000 and wrapped a week early because Fuller used handheld Aeroflex cameras smuggled in from Germany. Thelma Ritter, playing Stool Pigeon Moe, ad-libbed her own funeral price list. Her resulting Oscar nomination became a rallying point for character actors everywhere. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover condemned the picture for making pickpockets heroic, inadvertently boosting its grosses. French New Wave directors later exalted Fuller as America's poet of brute surfaces. Jean-Luc Godard wallpapered his Paris office with lobby cards from the film. Modern restoration revealed Fuller's preferred silver-rich print, finally showcasing Joe McDonald's sweat sheen lighting that had been dulled in earlier releases. Its breakneck editing still feels faster than Twitter refreshes, and Ritter's world-weary monologue about selling neckties on Death Day will crack even the toughest cynic. Ikiru, 1952. Akira Kurosawa shelved samurai swords to film a municipal clerk dying of stomach cancer on an $85,000 budget, 1/10 what Toho would soon spend on Seven Samurai. The director split the narrative, first half a study in Twilight despair, second half a flashback mosaic where co-workers debate his legacy. Takashi Shimura, bald-capped and hunched, shadowed real bureaucrats, adopting their rubber stamps as percussion instruments of futility. Kurosawa staged the climax in a children's playground at midnight, dousing the set with hoses so snowflakes would cling to Shimura's overcoat as he rocks on a swing and murmurs, "Life is brief." Domestic audiences wept. Overseas art houses crowned it the year's revelation. The film inspired Brazil's President Juscelino Kubitschek to order public park expansions, and Ingmar Bergman screened it for cast before shooting Wild Strawberries. Modern remake rights float through Hollywood every few years, proof of its timeless pull, yet nothing matches Kurosawa's quiet light, blooming through bureaucratic gray. It delivers a gut-punch reminder to make each day count, and its final swing set image can still reset any viewer's moral compass within 90 seconds. Elevator to the Gallows, 1958. Louis Malle was only 24 when he slipped into Parisian Nights with a spare crew, a handheld Camflex, and a thriller script co-written with crime novelist Roger Nimier. The plot seems airtight, a well-planned murder timed to an elevator ride, but one snag locks the killer between floors and turns the building itself into a steel mousetrap. Malle shot 2 parallel worlds, inside the lift, lit by a single dangling bulb, and on the rain-slick boulevards where Jean Moreau wanders, face glossed by neon and storefront fluorescence. Those exteriors were filmed without permits. Cinematographer Henri Decaye pushed Ilford stock to unheard-of speeds so the city lights would expose, pioneering the new wave's taste for available light. Then came the score. Miles Davis, in Paris for a club residency, watched a silent work print and improvised trumpet lines from midnight to dawn, his quartet following the flickering images rather than a written chart. The result is a leathery nocturnal jazz pulse that critics still cite as the moment cinema learned to breathe cool. French censors trimmed hints of adultery, but the Cannes jury gave Malle's debut a standing ovation. Within 2 years, Godard, Truffaut, and Chabrol were quoting its roaming camera. Cue it up now, because the film captures Paris at real-time midnight tempo, and Miles Davis's score turns every sidewalk puddle into liquid blues. Seven Samurai, 1954. Akira Kurosawa's Village Siege began with an accounting nightmare. A 125 million yen budget, horses rented from the Imperial Household Cavalry, and a shoot that ballooned from 12 weeks to nearly 12 months as monsoon rains turned sets into swamps. Kurosawa's solution was simply to keep rolling, often with 3 cameras grinding simultaneously. One for the actor's face, one for the sword strike, one for the horse's recoil, so that instant Kinetic montage could be carved in the editing room. He and cinematographer Asakazu Nakai mixed telephoto lenses, rare in 1950s Japan, with deep focus wides that let battle chaos play out like ballet in muddy slow motion. Composer Fumio Hayasaka threaded three leitmotifs: villagers, bandits, samurai, and let them collide in the climactic rain battle, a set piece now taught in every action directing seminar. When Toho finally unveiled the 207-minute cut, domestic critics balked at the length, but ticket lines wrapped blocks. A trimmed international version ignited Cannes. From The Magnificent Seven to A Bug's Life and every ragtag team movie in between, the template is here. Gather heroes, train innocents, defend the powerless. Press play in the present because its morality tale of defending the vulnerable never goes out of season. Night of the Demon, 1957. Producer Hal Chester hired noir maestro Jacques Tourneur to adapt M.R. James's ghost story Casting the Runes, then clashed with him over one question: show the demon or merely suggest it? Tourneur preferred unseen dread. Chester demanded a monster. A rubber and pyrotechnics behemoth was shot in separate effect passes and spliced in later, an intervention purists still debate. Principal photography unfolded on England's Shepperton backlot and wind-whipped Surrey Heath, where cinematographer Ted Scaife used infrared filters to make dusk skies boil like witch smoke. Composer Clifton Parker laced the soundtrack with reverse timpani rolls, so thunder seems to rumble backward. Columbia Pictures chopped 12 minutes and retitled it Curse of the Demon for U.S. drive-ins. Even so, it outgrossed expectations and gradually accumulated a cult aura. Martin Scorsese and Guillermo del Toro cite its creeping paper seance scene as a masterclass in escalating unease, and scholars still parse Dana Andrews' rationalist hero as the template for Fox Mulder decades later. Cue it today because it proves atmosphere can raise gooseflesh faster than CGI, and the don't pass the parchment countdown remains a textbook lesson in suspense math. Giant, 1956. George Stevens hauled a caravan of soundstages, livestock, and Hollywood stars to the dusty town of Marfa, Texas, where temperatures cracked 110 degrees Fahrenheit and sandstorms erased tracks between takes. Adapted from Edna Ferber's novel, the shoot stretched to 5 months. Post-production consumed another year as Stevens sifted through 1 million feet of VistaVision film. James Dean, method to the core, drove bulldozers and slept in bunkhouses with cattle hands until a fatal road accident ended his life weeks after Rap. Actor Nick Adams re-recorded many of Dean's lines in looping sessions, so subtle even fans still debate which syllables belong to whom. At 3 hours and 21 minutes, Giant was a gamble on epic domestic drama. Oil wealth, racial prejudice against Mexican Americans, gender politics inside the Benedict Ranch. Its $5.5 million budget made it Warner Brothers. Most expensive project to date, yet global grosses soared to $39 million. Stevens won Best Director, Dean received a second posthumous nomination, and the town of Marfa reinvented itself as a cinephile pilgrimage site. Unmissable right now because it frames American class, race, and ambition with sweep still unmatched, and it's the last chance to watch James Dean's talent blazing at full wattage. The Tarnished Angels, 1957. Douglas Sirk left Technicolor suburbia behind to adapt William Faulkner's Pylon, stripping color to austere black and white cinemascope that bleeds despair from every widescreen corner. Sirk re-teamed Rock Hudson, Dorothy Malone, and Robert Stack, fresh off Written on the Wind, and plunged them into the 1930 Mardi Gras air racing circuit. Universal converted a Louisiana airfield into a graveyard of biplanes and camera cranes. Aerial coordinator Frank Tallman looped vintage travel air bangers through real barrel rolls, while cinematographer Irving Glassberg's 600mm lenses tracked them against storm clouds. Budget constraints forced dialogue scenes to double as expository voiceover, giving the picture a breathless, pulp serial velocity Faulkner might have admired. Critics dismissed it as just another melodrama, but Sirk's visual motifs, whirling propellers mirrored by spinning carnival rides, wings clipped like fraying marriages, reveal a filmmaker dissecting American myth with a surgeon's calm. Later, auteurs caught on. François Truffaut screened it for students, Catherine Bigelow borrowed its cockpit claustrophobia for Blue Steel, worth carving out time for because it converts Faulkner's fatal obsessions into airborne poetry. And Cirque's stark monochrome proves black and white can blaze hotter than color. There it is, Film Fam, 15 celluloid rockets guaranteed to ignite any movie night, now supercharged with 5 all-time greats. Which title just skydived to the top of your queue? Let me know below, smash subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss another deep dive into cinema's hidden chambers. Share this with that friend who has seen it all, and watch them scramble for the popcorn. Until next time, keep the reels spinning and your hearts wide open for the magic of forgotten and now rediscovered film.